Okay, good evening. Welcome back. If people could take their seats and prepare for the all-candidate forum. Thank you for all coming back. Welcome back. Again, I am Ron Lawford, the Chief Electoral Officer for the National Chief Elections. For registered chiefs and proxies, I hope you've had a chance to cast a ballot in the test vote for National Chief via the Simply Voting platform. If you haven't already, please check your email and cast your vote now. You have until 8 a.m. tomorrow, but it'd be appreciated if you could do so tonight to iron out any wrinkles you may have with accessing the vote. Before we begin the All Candidates Forum, I have a few housekeeping items to review. As you know, voting for National Chief begins tomorrow at 9 a.m. Eastern Time. If you are a chief or proxy registered for the SCA and have checked in and haven't yet received an email from Simply Voting, please drop by our office next door in room 303 or call our Elections Help Desk tonight to ensure your registration is in order. Voting tomorrow will close at 3 p.m. Eastern Time, and results will be announced at approximately 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time. If another round of balloting is required, they will begin at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, and if needed, further rounds will be held. I'm just going to review a few slides, and we're going to go into some of the campaign finance requirements that the candidates needed to clear. So if we could bring up the slides on the PowerPoint. There it is. Wonderful. So as required, I will review the campaign expenses and contributions in the alphabetical order of the candidates. Do I have a remote? I have a remote. So just to go over the key points of the charter on this point, the charter here states that the limit for expenditures by each candidate for election purposes shall be $35,000. As well, on the day prior to the election, which is today, each candidate shall submit a certified preliminary statement of campaign expenses and names of contributors to the Chief Electoral Officer in a sufficient time for the All Candidates Open Forum to be informed. So here we are to inform you of those particular pieces. Earlier today, each of the candidates did, or perhaps even earlier than today, the candidates did submit to the Electoral Officer their finances. We reviewed them, and each of the candidates met the requirements. On this next page, you can see the contributions and expenses for each candidate. So I'll just quickly go through them. Candidate Bellerose had contributions of $35,000 and expenses of $34,613. Candidate Mackinac, contributions of $13,500 and expenses of $14,327. Candidate North, contributions of $30,660 and expenses also $30,660. Candidate Pratt, $35,000 in contributions and expenses of $34,890.
Thank you for having me at the Assembly this evening. Let's make an acknowledgement that we're in the traditional unceded Anishinaabe Algonquin traditional territory. Thank you for hosting us during the election. So I guess I'd like to start off with my candidacy for the National Chief. I take the role seriously, so I'm here to work with the chiefs, work with the elders, and work with the youth. So, you know, we hear that the elders and the youth aren't being heard, and I think we need to change that. We need to look at a different format where there's more participation by both the elders and the youth, and we need to look at how we're going to do these summer and winter sessions, because we need to have more input from both the youth and the elders. So, you know, that's something I want to look at as we move forward. And, you know, as we're talking about that, you know, we talk about comments about AFN over the years, and even now, just recently hearing about it. AFN is not a rights holder, and it never has. So, you know, that's something I want to assure the chiefs that as we move forward, it's the chiefs that we listen to. So we're going to be working with the chiefs and getting their input in dealing with just with the federal government. I don't really want to comment too much on the provincial government. That's trilateral agreements, and I'm not into trilateral agreements. I'd rather stick with the bilateral agreements, the true intent to treaty, because if we can do that and work together that way, that will ensure as we move forward that the treaty is being acknowledged. Because as you're all aware, that we're hearing that the government is looking at fourth level of government, and I don't think the chiefs want to hear that. I think they want to hear that we're a bilateral process, and we need to keep that going so that we can have a future for our youth, because we have, you know, we hear from our elders, we need to think 7 generations ahead, and this is one of the ways that we can do that. So I want to keep doing that, and as we move the office forward, because I know there's internal issues that can be dealt with with the National Chief's Office and the executive, with the staff, and you know, I've had previous experience being a regional chief, and I can bring that experience to the table because I worked with some of the regional chiefs that are still there when I was regional chief at that time. So I'll bring that experience to the table and working with everyone in the national office, because I'm aware how AFN works, and you know what can be done and what we can improve on. So that's what I bring with my 30 years of experience being a chief, regional chief, grand chief, and close to 20 years as a council member. That experience will come in handy as we're dealing with the issues as we go forward, because there's a lot of issues, and we need to make sure that we're on top of them, especially when you talk about legislation that's being proposed by the federal government. We need to look at that seriously, because they're talking about the Indian Act, and there's 3 parts to that we have to be wary of, actually 4 parts to it. We need to look at membership, which is an important issue for all of us, because that affects our C1 and C2 members, and we need to work on that and address that so that those inequalities aren't there anymore. So so that's what I want to look at, so that we can deal with those inequalities. And with judicial, you know, we have so many issues with the courts that we need to deal with, because we have too many members that are in federal institutions, and that doesn't need to happen. We need to change that. We're in charge. You know, we're having more courthouses on reserve and more programs for our members. So, especially in the judicial system, we need to help them deal with their issues. And you know, a lot of that stems, you know, from the intergenerational trauma, because that's one issue that was, you know, it has come to the forefront since the residential school, finding those buried children in Kamloops. So that has to be dealt with, and you know, as we move forward and deal with these addictions of our members, they'll be better off, so everybody will be better off, so we need to look at that. And other ones that we need to look at is our infrastructure gap, because right now that's a critical issue, because when you talk about that, that includes housing, and especially CMHC, because I remember when I was regional chief, we talked about that Aboriginal CMHC fund, and I think we need to come back to the table to talk about that, because if we can do that and get that in place, that'll be better off for our members across Canada, and we'll be able to, get more housing for our members, because our populations are getting bigger and our land base is getting smaller, so we need to look at getting more houses, and in turn the infrastructure is getting old in all our bands, because we need to do some upgrades there, and we need to make sure that things are in place, because one of the national organizations we're not including in a lot of these agreements is the Infrastructure Canada. They need to be at the table with Indian Affairs, so that we have two funding sources there, because if Infrastructure Canada can work with the cities and towns across Canada, why not with us? What's the difference? Because we need to make sure that we're treated equally. So that's another thing I want to bring to the table, is that, because we need to make sure that these inequalities in different areas are addressed, and and once we do that, things will be better off for our members, because we talk about these inequalities, and that's one of them, and especially with the lands, because especially under treaty, because one of the areas we need to look at is, as we sign treaty, the government was supposed to give us land as our populations get bigger. That hasn't happened. Instead our lands are getting smaller, and we need more land. Everybody needs more land. All the bands need land across the country, and we need to look at that inequality. So that's one of the things I want to bring to the table, is looking at that and making sure that they follow on treaty. And I commend the bands that won their court cases, Chief Sayers for their case. That helps us out quite a bit as we're dealing with these issues, because as more cases come to court, we can use these to our advantage, and that's something that we need to do, because especially just recently, one of the bands in Quebec won a case, and that talks about the relationship between the federal government and the bands and the British Crown. So I'd like to look at that decision, because if there's wording on that decision that can help us in going forward, we should look at that, because that will be to our advantage. And if we can use those wording and whatever decisions that have been made in future agreements, that's what we got to do, because we can't stay status quo anymore. Status quo is we're letting the government dictate to us what we need to do. It's got to be the other way around, where we're telling the government what to do. So that's what I want to see, is a different relationship, where it's not a top-down approach from the federal government to the chiefs and to the national office. It should be the other way around, where it's from the chiefs down to the national office and then the federal government. So that's one approach I want to look at, is changing that relationship with the government, because they need to know that we're the ones that should be making these decisions, not them. And they need to consult with us, because if they don't do that, then unfortunately we'll go to court again in all these areas, and it's a costly process. So we need to keep that consultation going, which in turn, we have to work with advocacy, advocate more for the chiefs and the councils, because the national office should be doing that in different ways, so that they're there for the chiefs, and whatever help they need, in whether it's going to court or dealing with the federal government and all these issues, because the more we advocate and work with the chiefs, the better off overall will be for the bands as we move forward. So that's another thing I'd look at, is the advocacy, because it needs to be where it should have been in the first place, because I'm always reminded of when I when I always go to the national office, you have that robe there with the National Indian Brotherhood, all the original chiefs signing that off. I'd like to look at the intent of the national office and making sure that we're following that wording, because if we can get back to the original purpose of AFN with the National Indian Brotherhood, then we'll be better off overall. You know, so that's something I want to look at. And you know, one of the areas too, I know in years previous was the Confederacy of Nations. That needs to be still there, because we don't need that taken out, because that supports the chiefs if they have a problem with the national office. So we need to make sure that still stays in there, because we need a mechanism there so that if the chiefs have any issues or problems, that they can call upon the Confederacy of Chiefs, because that is there to protect the chiefs, I think, and you know, keep the national office in order, because you know, we can use those areas where we're consulting with the chiefs and our elders, and these issues can be dealt with as we move forward. You know, so these are some of the things, and you know, with health issues, we need to look at lifting that moratorium on hospitals, treatment centers, and other facilities, because our populations are getting bigger. We need more facilities for our members. And unfortunately, going to the local towns and cities, we face racism, and that's not right. You know, we face that, and if we can get these facilities on reserve for our members, and that's a better for them, because we can provide those services for them, and they can be assured that they'll be treated equally. So that's one of the things I want to look at, and programs for addictions. You know, what our members are facing in addictions in different areas, suicide. We need to keep those programs in place, because as we get a healthier population, especially our youth, you know, that'll benefit them, because we need to support them, because in 10, 20 years' time, a lot of those youth will be sitting here in these tables as chiefs and council members, and we got to have a mechanism in place to help them and support them as they move forward. And you know, we can do that and keep things going and supporting them. I can see that as a positive down the road, and then that way, you know, it'll work out. And one of the things I didn't speak on earlier, and I guess a lot of us candidates were asked by CBC about the 60 Scoop inquiry. And, you know, we're all on record as saying we support that, and I support that. But in turn, we need to look at C9-2 and adding a couple more clauses in there. And always, when I was regional chief, we never had that opportunity, because we didn't have enough time, and two clauses need to be put in C9-2. There needs to be a sunset clause and a transition phase. And when I say that, it's we need to set a date where it goes bilateral now between the federal government and the bands, and the province will be taken out of the picture altogether. We need to look at that, because we don't need no more apprehensions of our children going into foster care. And if we look at that in C9-2 in supporting our child welfare agencies, and then getting the programs in place for our parents so they can bring back their children, that's a win-win situation for everyone. So that's something I want to keep pushing, because it's we need to bring our children home, because it's you know, a lot of them, when they come home and there's no support for them and they feel lost, and this is one way we can help them get back to where they're at. So that's just some of the other stuff. And off-reserve funding for off-reserve members, because that's another one where we hear it from the chief and council level that we don't have funding in place for our members. But that's because of the way Indian Affairs sets their funding agreements, the CFAs. We need to call on them to talk to the other agencies that are out there that are collecting the dollars for our members off reserve, National Congress of Aboriginal People and other organizations that are getting those dollars. We need to call on them to start providing the services. I know I ended up calling one of them and wasn't really much of an answer, but you know, we need to make sure that our officer members are taken care of. And if those agencies don't want to do it, then we need to find a different way, and maybe looking at new CFAs where our officer members, because we talk about traditional territories, and that's one of the areas, you know, if we can use traditional territories and agreements, then maybe we should look at finding those dollars and working the agreements where our officer members are taken care of. Because I know a lot of the bands across Canada have satellite offices in the big cities, and it would work hand in hand. So that's another one I'd look at to make sure that our officer members are taken care of. And the transfer agreements, I made mention of that, but we really need to look at that and break in the transfer agreements with the provinces so that the dollars go back to the bands. Because there's 5 programs nationally that the federal government gives dollars to the provinces, and if we can look at a way where we can break those transfer agreements, then it'll be better for everyone overall across Canada. And that's one of the other things we need to look at, because if we can do that, then that will benefit our members as we move forward. And the other area over the years when I was chief was we've always talked about Indian monies, and we need to look at that again. And one of the reasons why I'm saying that is if some bands in the States won their court case years ago beating the Bureau of Indian Affairs, why can't we do that here? Because I know I heard in one of the caucus rooms, in one of the rooms, that one of the bands is going to be looking at that, you know, and if they're going to do that, let's support them. Because once we can finally get the decision on Indian monies, it'll benefit everyone across Canada. So I see that as if that happens, then you know it's a win-win for everybody. And then that way, you know, we can deal with these historical wrongs that the government has done to us, especially under Indian monies in the different resource areas that they've benefited. So you know that's something that we need to look at so that for the future. And that's one thing I want to plan is for the future, because I've heard comments that no one is talking about how AFN is going to move forward. You know, this is one of the ways the national office can move forward with working with the chiefs is what's the direction going forward for AFN working with the chiefs, and how can a national office have sustainable funding for 5-10 years down the road? Because of these 10-year grants, we're hearing about them. If that's coming to an end, I think it's in the next 3 to 4 years or sooner. We need to be prepared. We need to be proactive and find ways to dealing with that. Because if we don't, the federal government will have us at the 11th hour scrambling to find ways to deal with the issue. So I want to take the proactive approach, and if we can find ways and solutions to deal with these issues now and down the road, we should. And any way we can do that, we should do that. We shouldn't limit ourselves just to what the federal government is saying. We should find other ways and other organizations that will support us. You know, we just need to find out who's out there that could help us and talk to them. Because once that's in play, you know, it's better for long-term funding for the national office and bands across Canada. So that's one other thing I'd look at. And the last one, I guess, would be the office in working with other areas that we're talking about, so that we can make sure that the national office informs every council what's happening, and finding, you know, making sure that they're aware of what's coming down the road so that they're not, the chiefs and councils aren't surprised. So more communication with the chiefs and councils as we move forward. So thank you. My time is up. Tim?
Thank you, Candidate Mackinac. At this time, I'd like to call up Candidate Sayers.
Bonjour, Kinuea. Wagamanda Managojin Guayakasat Njnakaz, Chief Dean Sayers, Batchewana First Nation, and I really appreciate the ability to be here today. And I was chief in Batchewana for darn near 20 years, and I really enjoyed the company of all my colleagues I see in the room today, including Batchewana's new chief here, Chief Mark McCoy. Thank you for joining us here this evening. I want to give a moment to Chief Lynn Ankos from Sakamay First Nation to help out as we begin this few minutes of contemplation together. Miigwech. Chief Ankos.
Miigwech. First of all, I want to acknowledge the land of the Algonquin Anishinaabe and thank them for welcoming us to their territory. And I secondly want to say that all of the candidates for running for national chief are all of my friends and my colleagues. And I just want to say that I believe in all of you. I first met Dean Sayers when I was a Green Chief, one of my first times attending the AFN, and we were sitting in a dialogue session. And we were talking about education. And someone had mentioned that, that Section 34 was an empty box. And I didn't know Dean Sayers, Chief Sayers. And I looked at him, I was puzzled. And he spoke up and he said, I see that my box is full of our inherent and treaty rights. I see my box as full. It's Canada that thinks that the Section 35 box is an empty box. And so I admired Dean's approach, his way of thinking about what our inherent and treaty rights are. They're lasting, they're enduring, and they have never gone away. And so that started our long journey as colleagues and friends. And I've also kept in touch with Dean about the groundbreaking work that they've done in Restoule versus Her Majesty the Queen, otherwise known as the Robinson-Huron case. Groundbreaking work that paved the way, visionary work that paved the way for the rest of us to address indexing annuities going into the future. So I've admired the things that he's done in his career. I've admired the visionary process that he undertook to see things to the end. And I admire his dedication and perseverance. Miigwech.
Miigwech Gimakwe. I'm an Anishinaabe, and part of our process as we go into other communities, wherever I've went, I'd wear my hat periodically, my chief's hat. And whatever community I would go to, I'd go and see the chief, and I would ask if I could wear my hat in that community. And I'd seek the blessing of the leadership, and I'd look for the support as I would be there, whether I was dancing or whether I was speaking. And I really appreciate the welcome that I've received here in the unceded territories of the Algonquin people. And I appreciate the warm welcome that I've received from the Algonquin leadership. I truly appreciate that. And it brings to mind as well what happened here earlier tonight when we were brought in by Spirit, and we were brought in by beautiful dancers with song, with Bear Creek singing, with elders, with youth, with chiefs. Such a beautiful wave to ride into this assembly hall, supported by our ancestors. And I say that because we had ceremony today at sunrise, and some of the comments I heard Regional Chief, one of the regional chiefs making mention at sunrise this morning that he'd never seen so many people at sunrise, and that is really beautiful to see the evolving embrace that's happening with our ways once again, which it should be, because we are a unique people. This afternoon, one of our elders from home asked for a pipe ceremony, and we invited all of the candidates. But what was beautiful about the pipe ceremony was that it was an opportunity for us to ask our ancestors to guide us and guide you in your contemplations and who might be the best suited to be your national chief. And of course, I would love to do that for you and be with you, but we ask the spirits to guide us in that contemplation and in that decision. So it was nice. So we've had Spirit, and Spirit's here with us. Our culture is here with us, and they're with us. So it's nice to be in good company with you, but it's also nice to be in good company with our ancestors today. And it was so nice. And we're going to remember this. All my grandkids that came in today, these are the things that we need to replicate. We need to develop. We need to invest in beautiful new memories for our people. We didn't have quite the nicest history, but the future looks beautiful. And we can help make the future beautiful for our people. And there's some methodology that we can embark on to make sure that we get where we need to be, and that we can do that in a beautiful, kind way as we are, as Anishinaabe, as the original people. And I'm not saying anything. I'm not absent, abnormal, less than. I'm original. You're original. We are the original peoples. This is where we were lowered. We weren't lowered in Africa. We weren't lowered over in Asia and across the Bering Strait. This is where our creation started. This is where we came from. And with that came inherent obligations. It's really beautiful to be a part of our processes here, and to be a part of the evolution of us as the original peoples on these lands. When we were lowered here, what I understand, we were given a distinct set of obligations that we have as peoples with a capital P, and I said it intentionally because that has international recognition. We are a peoples. We are not a small letter P. We are the first level of governments on these lands. We gave powers and services and supports to the newcomers. We did not receive any rights from the newcomers. We delegated authorities to them. And what we had as a people, as peoples from coast to coast to coast, was our inherent obligation to protect our nationhood, and that included the protection of our land, our language, our law, our people, and our way of life. That's what we are. We are nations. We are not a subservient group of people in a domestic, less than relationship with the newcomers to our lands. We are the first peoples. We will drive. We will delegate authorities. We have to change the narrative. And we have to do this through vehicles like the Assembly of First Nations, and we can do that. We have to be united from coast to coast to coast. And I say coast to coast to coast because far too often we forget about our friends to the north, up in the Yukon and Northwest Territories, and all the way across all those lands that are on the border of the Arctic Ocean. We need to be inclusive. We need to be united. There is no one size fits all. We need to be out there. We can't have one meeting in Ottawa to serve all of our people and our diverse needs, our diverse relationships that we have across these lands. So one of the things that I wanted to share with you as well is I truly believe in our ways. I'm not Canadian. I'm Anishinaabe. And that has been hit home with me as soon as I took on this role as the formal elected chief, almost 20 years ago now. And what the elders would do, they would call me and tell me, you need to come in and talk to us, because minimize those federal legislations, minimize those Indian acts. Look at the treaty, look at what we inherited, go to ceremony, learn from the elders. That's what's going to get us through this phase. We need to know where we're going to go, and it's going to be based on what we have as nations. And I've heard that from many, many elders. And our leadership that's here from Batchewana, I know that we've all been at those tables where these elders have told us how we need to be as the original peoples that have probably the most powerful reserved jurisdictions of anybody on our lands, and the most powerful people from coast to coast to coast. And that's you. You have the power. Don't let anybody trick you into thinking that you are less than and you have less power than any of the new peoples on our lands. What the elders told me, they said, and I'll share this with you, when we entered into the discussions around treaties, agreements, and I'm going to talk a little more about this in a few minutes, but I want to share with you this one story. The elders said, one of the elders back home from Kitaganzibi, he said, when we made our way to discuss treaties, we left with our canoes so full that they barely rode above the water. And in our canoe was our language, our law, our people, our spirituality, like all those core essences that we are: language, law, people, land, culture, all of that, including the deer, the moose, the fish, the caribou, the elk, the seals, the polar bears, the flora, the fauna, all of those things that we inherited from the Creator were in our canoe. It was so full of everything. And we arrived at treaty making, we seen what they call the big canoes that were pushed by the clouds, those white sails. And they said their boats were so high above the water, they rode so high because they had nothing in their boat. We gave them a little bit. We gave them the methodology to survive. We shared a little bit of our natural resources. We did not give them everything. We didn't surrender. There was never any war. We shared, which was intended through the prophecies that were shared with me and with all of us. And then the elder said, guess what we had when we left? What did we have in our canoe? He said, our canoe was still so full that it barely rode above the water. We still had our land, our language, our law, our people, and our spirituality. We still had it all, and we delegated authority to them. We didn't get anything at treaty. They didn't have anything to give us. Actually, the elder said, we don't have treaty rights. We gave them treaty rights. We own and reserve all of those governance inherent jurisdictions as peoples from coast to coast to coast. And as I travel across Canada, I listen to you leadership, whether you're in British Columbia, the Yukon. I talk to you through whatever medium I can, all the provinces. And what a diverse peoples we are. All kinds of agreements. There's pre-Confederation, historic treaties, there's modern treaties, modern agreements, and then there are those that are not interested in any type of agreements and want to retain 100% of what you inherited from the Creator and our ancestors. And that's the variance that we have to be reflective of as we evolve at the Assembly of First Nations. We need to set, if there are 70 existing agreements and 30 that are being worked on and another 40 that are being asserted, well, maybe there's 150 tables that need to be set across this country, not one table in Ottawa. I'm not going to sit in Ottawa. I'm not going to be here waiting for a meeting with the Prime Minister. I want to see and support you, those of you that are championing out there. You're the ones that are asserting logging jurisdiction, fishing jurisdiction, permitting system around mining. If you're doing something great, your reserved inherent expectations are being respected. We need to be talking about that at this assembly. We all need to hear where the champions are, and we need to hold them up and celebrate them, and we need to replicate that. We need to take action based on what we see. I hear from you continually, we're tired of hearing about Canadian legislation for that, provincial legislation for this, continually hearing the settler governments and what they're doing in their assumptions of illegally asserting jurisdictions. Our canoe is still full, folks. We have it all. We need to mobilize, and I'm prepared, with the support of my council at Batchewana over the decades, in the many years that I've been involved, we asserted logging jurisdiction. The Crown couldn't afford to lose, so they withdrew the challenge in their courts at the last minute, and we negotiated a logging processes with the Crown that recognized our unextinguished jurisdiction over the forest, and we have, on an interim basis, we have a parallel logging management system while we work on a long-term logging management system that will be under the guise and under the determination of unextinguished Indigenous jurisdiction over the forest based on our law as original people. And Ontario, and I believe all the provinces, will, with challenges, succumb and provide an alignment with our unextinguished jurisdictions over the forest. We have it. We have the markets. I think it's the first time unextinguished jurisdictional recognition and assertion of our forests. And that's just one. We have the same thing with fishing. We don't take no license from Canada or Ontario. Where did they get the fish? That's not their fish. It's our fish to look after in a sustainable way. We delegated authority to them for whatever we determine we can delegate authority to them for, including fishing, including logging. They asserted illegally that jurisdiction, and we got to stop them from asserting all these jurisdictions. Our canoe is still full. Even when we think about the Métis challenge, did we give them, as a visiting government, the right to determine all kinds of rights for all kinds of groups of people? No.
Donc, non. Si tout le monde, les gens alentour du monde veulent une relation sur notre terre, sous notre juridiction, ils doivent venir à vos tables et vous demander la permission. Quant à ce qu'ils veulent proposer et faire, s'ils veulent prendre le chevreuil, le caribou, l'orignal, ils doivent venir vous voir. Ils ne doivent pas aller voir le gouvernement des colons. Ils doivent venir nous voir, puisque nous avons donné la juridiction des animaux. Donc, dans mon esprit, tous ces droits spéciaux, même pour les Métis, en fait, c'est illégal, puisque nous ne leur avons pas donné ce droit. Vous êtes un peuple très puissant. Il y a tellement de symptômes de cette colonisation et ces assumptions, ces présomptions de juridiction qui sont tellement au contraire à notre bien-être. Et notre gouvernement, en fait, il fait le travail dont nous devons faire en prenant le rôle de fiduciaire pour notre peuple, mais nous ne pouvons pas penser aux nouveaux arrivants qui nous financent. Et nous devons les voir dans notre cours, puisque nous avons juridiction en tant que détenteurs des droits. Et s'ils n'ont pas un reçu pour l'exploitation forestière, c'est toujours à nous. S'ils n'ont pas un reçu pour le système éducatif, c'est toujours le nôtre. Et ils nous doivent. Et nous devons reprendre notre juridiction. Il n'y a pas de modèle pour tout le monde d'un océan à l'autre. Nous avons besoin de la reconnaissance, du respect.
From these new governments. And not only is that an expectation that we have with the new governments on our lands, that's an expectation that I've heard from all of you that we need amongst ourselves. We need to support each other's assertions, each other's jurisdictions. And where the provinces are causing divide and conquer with giving lands to certain people without talking to us, those kinds of things have to stop, and we need to stop. We need to make sure that doesn't happen anymore. We hold that power. You hold that power. If we had 600 fires burning across the country as opposed to just one, we would be a lot better off. And I remember I went to a gathering out in Manitoba, 15 years ago. Where's Terry? And it was a meeting of the warrior societies, and we were talking about re-evolving how we are going to address things in the future in peaceful, kind ways, and how we were going to assert our unextinguished jurisdictions. And one of the things that the societies from across the country said, we made a mistake when we went to Oka. Within Oka, we had all of our leadership, the thinkers, the strategizers, the people that helped us maintain our resiliency were all in the confines of that area. And Canada had their army pointed at us. And they said, all Canada had to do was this one foul swoop and it would have set us back forever. And what we talked about at that time was, we're not going to have one fire burning. When that happens next time, we'll have 600 fires burning across the country, and we'll all mobilize, we'll all get involved, we'll all get active, and we'll draw the lines, and we'll assert in kind ways, in our original ways, through deliberations and contemplations with our elders. I'm looking forward to your support as your next National Chief.
Thank you, Candidate Sayers. At this point, I will call up Candidate Woodhouse.
Knocking them down. Yeah. Wache and bonjour and good evening. My name is David Crate. I'm the Chief of the Fisher River Cree Nation, longtime chief, almost 30 years now. And I'm very pleased to be able to take a few minutes of your time to introduce the candidate, my candidate for the National Chief's Office, Cindy Woodhouse. I want to, first of all, acknowledge also the Algonquin people and their traditional lands, also the Anishinaabe people and traditional lands, the elders that are gathered here this evening, leadership, and all the members from the various nations from across the country. I wanted to, I knew this for quite some time, even I think prior to Cindy knowing that she would be stepping forward to run for the national office. Because the reason I say that is because I've known Cindy a long time, since she was a young girl, and I've watched her grow within the political circle in Manitoba, but also at the national level. Her involvement behind the scenes with some of our former national leaders like Phil Fontaine and Ovid Mercredi and a few others. But Cindy has matured into a very strong individual that I believe will move our communities and our nations forward. We're at a very critical time in our history now, not only because of the political upheavals across the world, but because of the environmental issues that we're dealing with. People, the sad reality is a lot of our nations are struggling to deal with the environmental issues in this country. And we all know where things are moving, and I believe, and I'm going to make it a priority with the national office, that we have to focus a lot on the environment. In particular, our water and our lands are being impacted to a point that we're seeing upheaval across the lands now with environmental catastrophes happening, and also globally. We never hear us talking at the national forums about the situation that a lot of our communities are dealing with unpotable water because of the mining exploration that's taking place, and it's only going to get worse for our communities. And I know Cindy is a strong individual, but she's also very strong on building relationships. I've watched her build relationships with many different people in government, and most recent is the Child welfare settlement. I think we all know that things like this have to happen more often for our people, and not only sitting across the table from somebody, but you have to know the individual and build a relationship with them. And with the possible change in government coming in the very near future, we have to have somebody that can build a relationship regardless of who's in government. And I ask the leadership across the country to seriously consider supporting Cindy Woodhouse as their candidate for National Chief. Thank you.
Just want to say good evening to everyone here. I just want to say miigwech to everyone that's here and watching online. My name is Kyra Wilson. I'm Chief for Long Plain First Nation with Treaty 1 territory. I acknowledge the territory we're on here today, and I just want to say thank you for the warm welcome. And as we are here today, we are talking about who is going to be our next national chief. And I stand here today as one of our chiefs in the Manitoba region, and I stand here, endorsing Cindy Woodhouse, who has, done some amazing work when we talk about the relationship building that you're needing when you're working with different levels of government, but also the advocacy that's required for our families, for our nations. And that's one of the biggest things that I've seen with Cindy, is that she's advocated